lecture we have now, is pre-recorded, and it's from Maria Visconti. Maria Visconti is a PhD student at the University of Minas Gerais in Brazil. She has a master and graduated degree in history at the same institution with a one-semester academic extension at Friedrich Alexander University in Erlangen-Nuremberg. She's one of the Brazilian Centers of Nazism and Holocaust Studies coordinators and a member of the Perpetrators Studies Network. Her thesis, Nazis, Narratives, Construction During the Nuremberg Trials, developed as a set of archetypes of ways the Nazis behaved and evaded responsibility during this trial. She will speak online about mediating and transmitting Holocaust memory on social media in Brazil, and I would ask to play the presentation of her.
Hi everyone, my name is Maria Visconti and I am at the final year of my PhD at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Brazil, and I am also one of the coordinators of the Brazilian Center for Nazism and Holocaust Studies, also known as NEPAT. Today I'll be briefly speaking about our work and about mediating and transmitting Holocaust memory on social media in Brazil and all the challenges and difficulties that it comes with it and how we manage to overcome them. It's a pleasure to be here at the conference Connected History, Memories and Narratives of the Holocaust in the Digital Space. I would like to thank very much the organizing committee and everyone who's watching this video. Thank you for accepting my paper. And unfortunately, I was not able to be physically present, but I am very glad to be able to give this presentation somehow. And I hope I'll get to know everyone in the near future where the COVID situation in Brazil is not so crazy. So I'm going to first introduce the Brazilian Center for Nazism and Holocaust Studies. I would like to begin talking a little bit about us. We are an independent and female-led initiative of young scholars from the history fields. The center has always been a female-led initiative. It was founded and is still led only by women. And now we are currently run by three coordinators, Barbara, Anna, my colleagues, and I. And NEPAT arose from the need to create spaces for academic dialogue in Brazil in the fields of Nazism and the Holocaust. Unfortunately, these fields of study are still not consolidated in Brazil, and Brazilian historians face constant challenges in conducting their research due to lack of investment, funding, and opportunities. Thus, one of our goals is to make research exchange easier, encouraging Brazilian scholars who study the Nazi regime, the Holocaust, and related fields. But in addition, we observed a growing demand from the general public for quality historical content about World War II, Nazi Germany, and the Holocaust. These subjects, of course, spark a lot of interest. So since 2019, NEPAT has been working on two major fronts: academic production and scientific divulgation, which will be our main topic here today. Although NEPAT is committed to expanding the Holocaust studies field in academia, something that we have achieved successfully, education and the public history field are just as significant in our mission. And for that reason, we were able to successfully promote NEPAT as a trustworthy source of quality content on the Holocaust and the Nazi regime in Brazil, due to our work on social media. So here we are talking about Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, also YouTube, and we also have a podcast. Furthermore, the accessibility of our work to the Brazilian audience is one of our main undertakings, and we uphold a high standard to promote and disseminate research that, until then, was only available in English. So we have a major role in this decolonization process of academia. But to start, I believe it's essential to emphasize Brazil's lack of studies about the Holocaust in the Nazi era. Even though several Nazis fled to Latin America to escape justice after the Third Reich, and Brazil was the destination of some important figures like Joseph Mengele and Franz Stengel, I believe the most famous, it is not a country that traditionally researched the Nazi regime. And that creates two major problems in the process of constructing a collective memory of the phenomenon. First, the absence of literature in Portuguese about those themes, leaves historians with scarce possibilities for conducting proper research, and also what I already mentioned, the lack of funding, investment, and research opportunities. And secondly, we consequently lack proper mass cultural materials for the broader public to engage with this past. That is something that we'll be talking a little bit further. It is also worth mentioning that Brazil has a significant problem with its own traumatic memory. We underwent a military dictatorship for many years. I believe everyone knows that, but we did not deal with our perpetrators, even less with our victims, unlike other Latin American countries. We still have monuments until today and streets named after torturers, and we did a very inferior job, to say the least, in our transition to democracy at the end of the 1980s. So this enormous problem with Brazil's transitional justice impacts the way we see and act towards democracy today. It is not that big of a surprise that we are now facing a fascist authoritarian regime. It is merely an answer to the remains of the dictatorship in our minds and in our collective memory. And Jair Bolsonaro, our president, it is, of course, a product of our time, but also a product of our past. So after this briefly introduction, I will talk a little bit about our work in the batch. And to start, I believe it's important to point out our methodological proposal, which is public history. It's important, of course, to point out that public history was born in the US as an attempt to expand the operational field for historians in a moment in which employment was scarce and new possibilities of activity were conceived, such as consulting for companies, marketing education, general historical communication, and among other things. So in all of these perspectives, the main goal was talking about history for a non-academic audience. And in a patch, we definitely agree with this idea, of course, that historians have a lot to say to the public debates in order to contribute to a more critical society. However, as Brazilian historians Bruno Leal and Ana Paula Teixeira talks in their article about public history in Brazil, here the rise of public history was not only related to a hard economic moment, which of course we are definitely in one and still are, but public history gained a large significance recently due to the overwhelming growth of dilemmas that the Brazilian society is facing, such as anti-intellectualism, the anti-scientificism, the conspiracies, the direct attacks to the academic environment and to the Brazilian universities, the public defense of prejudice, of excluding discourses, and apologizing of military dictatorship, and last but not least, of course, which is related today, the Holocaust denial. And I would like to make a comment about our work as historians at this point. The internet affected the way people connect with history, of course. It subverted the basis for the production and circulation of narratives about the past. Digital platforms such as blogs or social media allow anyone with internet access to convey their understandings of the past with the potential to reach hundreds of millions of people. And for history, this means that the well-established distinction between historians as producers of historiography and ordinary people, so to speak, as consumers of this history, is becoming increasingly blurred and more flexible. So the rules about who has the power and legitimacy to talk about the past have changed. And as historians, we must, of course, reflect on that new scenario and what this means for our profession. Because if narratives about the past are being produced without us, we should ask ourselves how to participate in this process. How can we take the lead in writing history in public spaces? And how should we use the tools provided by the internet to dialogue with the public in a way that's more effectively? By staying away from the public sphere, we historians risk losing our social relevance, and the public is deprived of a richer understanding of the past that could come from our contributions. Therefore, it seems to us more productive to seek a shared interpretation of the past, built in collaboration between historians and the public. We can act in ways to guide, to complement, and to inform the narratives, contributing with our professional knowledge to a more critical understanding of the past. The key here for us is to occupy virtual public spaces and not to avoid establishing a dialogue with the public. Another important thing to mention is that if we want to share academic historical knowledge with the general public, we need to adapt our communication because most people don't have the background knowledge that we specialists have. However, the importance of proper scientific dissemination is discredited by many within the academic world. Scientific divulgation is considered a copy-paste job, so to speak, which brings information to the public in an irresponsible way. Of course, that is not true, and we believe that scientific divulgation must be recognized as an intellectual production which requires thought and interpretive decisions, just like any other academic production. It's, of course, also worth mentioning that the constant growth of digital history as a relevant field among scholars is something to take notice. And I don't need to be explaining about this here today because I know that this conference is, of course, about this subject. So that's very important. And I'm very glad to be able to be here today talking about this. So talking about our platforms, I'm going to share my screen very quickly. Just a moment. Okay. So here, this is our Instagram feed. As you can see here, this is in a very gray, dark pattern, but it's because it's content related exclusively about the international event, academic event that we held in April, which held conference with McLaughlin, Christopher Browning, and if you want to see a little bit, it's all available on our YouTube. So that's why this pattern of colors here. But normally we do this. I'm going to address this very quickly. So Instagram was chosen in the first place because it is a platform where we can combine a good amount of texts and images, and it also because it's a social network. So it is very appropriate for us to cultivate a direct interaction with the course profiles followers. And of course, we also have a podcast that I will be talking a little bit after, because we think it's the perfect complement to the Instagram production as we can add more depth to the themes developed. So in our Instagram profile, we share different types of posts. As you can see here, it's very colorful, but all the colors are addressed to a specific type of content. So we seek to approach, for instance, in concept posts, which are this one here, for instance. Of course, everything is in Portuguese. We have some content in English, but mostly in Portuguese. So here is a concept post about law during the Nazi regime. As you can see, it's with this kind of purple shade. And in this kind of post, we seek to approach different concepts coined by researchers in the field of the Nazis and Holocaust studies or other relevant understanding of the period. And we use an analysis guided by specific papers and specific books. And as you can see here, we use Johann Chapoutot, The Lot of Blood, which is a book that we think it's very good. But as you can see, we are making this kind of content to translate, so to speak, these productions that are only available in English in Portuguese right now. So that's what we do in the end. Here we always have some kind of reflection about the theme and so on. Another way we found to address the interests of our followers are the indication posts. So in them, it is possible to integrate different narratives about the Holocaust as multiple forms of history and memory. So we indicate audiovisual material, such as movies, series, and documentaries. For instance, here, I don't know if in English this movie is His Back or something, Look Who's Back, or I don't know in English how is it, Ist Wieder Da, which is a very relevant movie. So Here we address this movie in connection with some reflections about Zygmunt Bauman in modernity and Holocaust. So this is what we do. We talk about the movie, but we also integrate other kinds of literature and content, so people don't have like just an indication like, oh, you go watch this movie. I mean, there's a reason why we are indicating them. So we also indicate sometimes documentaries, podcasts, but we also make literature indications, so academic books, but also other types of books. So here, for instance, we have this book here from Marilyn Brasht. I don't know how is it in English, but anyway, so here, as you can see, we talk a little about the author, and we talk about the book and the context, the historical context of this book. For this one specifically is about Korea during World War II. So as you can see, the color is different. Books indications are always blue, and the concepts, as I mentioned, are purple, and movies are this kind of orange sort of color. And so that's it. And we also produce finally our own historical calendar, where we share relevant dates and moments related to Nazism and the Holocaust and Second World War and relevant similar topics. So here, for example, we have International Holocaust Remembrance Day. This is a post that we did in Portuguese. Here is in Portuguese, but here, I mean, in the post is in Portuguese, but here, as you can see, is in English. And that's it. We talk a little about Auschwitz, how it was. We have Primo Levi's reflections on the theme, and so on. This is a historical calendar, as you can see. It's a different shade also. It's kind of pink. So that's it. So each of these types of posts has its own colors because it's easier for our followers to identify the topic that will be addressed to them. And our other major platform is our podcast. So I'm going to show you here. I'm showing you on Spotify because I think it's easier, but it's available on every major platforms and also on our website. We have some content in English too, so you can see there. Our podcast is called Desnazificando, which in English would be something like denazifying, and that is a totally different platform and also a very different public. On the podcast, we can elaborate the topics much more than we can do on Instagram, of course, because our episodes are mainly 1 hour, 1 hour 30 in length, as you can see. And at least half of them are made in collaboration with other researchers, which means that we ask someone and do an episode in a kind of interview way. So here, for instance, we have a topic about women in war with a woman researcher called Joyce Rodrigues, and that's it. And as you can see, the colors, I'm going to show it on Instagram feed. The colors are different from the podcast. Here, for instance, this is a podcast episode. As you can see, it's different, but not so different. It relates to our main brand and our main style, so it makes sense. It's not completely off when you look at it, and people already know that it's our podcast episode, but it's not so different, as you can see here, for instance. It's different, but not so much. You got it. So just to finish the topic of the brand and style, I need to mention that the visual identity is very important for us. So the creation of the brand, the design, the colors, the style, those are things that are indispensable for us. And that is something that academia and the historians mostly overlook. And we believe that the marketing and the visual identity really made a difference in our work. And that's why our profile is very colorful, which is very different from what we normally see from this kind of institution and this kind of content. But we think we got a pretty good response from our public with this kind of way, the way we do our work. So that's very important for us, and that's why we keep it this way. It's more of course, is also more related to current trends on social media. So that's why we believe we have a very good interaction with our public because of this. So I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment so I can finish off my presentation. I think it's essential to mention very briefly the difficulties we have within the platforms. When thinking about reaching an audience and building engagement, we also have to consider how every platform works, because they are very different, and the interaction with the content is also very different. And speaking specifically about Instagram, unfortunately, it's mainly concerned with the idea of the more the better. And in that sense, the algorithm favors people who dedicate their lives to the platform, which means posting every day, even twice a day, or appearing every day to talk to the audience. And mainly a new trend that is being privileged is making short videos, the Reels, which is also similar to TikTok. People who have Instagram as their primary source of work and income have to build strategies in this sense to reach a broader audience. However, that is unrealistic for us, not only because we do our scientific divulgation entirely for free, which means that we do not receive any income from Instagram, but also because we do not have the resources to build an ad campaign or to invest funds to reach more people, because we don't have any money really. I mean, we don't have any source of funding. So we do everything for free and we don't receive anything. So we can't really. But also because we elaborate that content in our spare time, so to speak. I mean, we have a research of our own. I mentioned I'm in the final year of my PhD, and we have to manage our time to write and to develop these contents, and we post on Instagram, and it takes a lot of work, which is also why we cannot grow our audience exponentially, because we just don't have the time and the resources to do so. And at last, it's also crucial to emphasize that we are women producing content on the internet, and we are women who do not use our image. When one scrolls our Instagram feed, as I showed you, it's very noticeable that there are no pictures of us, or very little pictures of us. And the reason is the same as the ones I mentioned before. We prioritize our content, and we are very serious about what we write and what we post. But it is, of course, another challenge. After all, any major in digital marketing will tell you that putting your face to your business is what guarantees your success. And we see, of course, other profiles that make much less serious content than ours, but they do it by posting pictures of themselves every day. So those people have much more followers than we do. That's unfortunate, but that's how things are, and that's it. So just to end my presentation, my final remarks, it's worth mentioning that people's curiosity about our work on social media can largely be attributed to the outstanding growth of neo-Nazi groups and neo-Nazi manifestations in Brazil in the last few years. The current president, Jair Bolsonaro, has indicated support for the right wing since the beginning of his political career. And with time, his associations with neo-Nazi groups became more and more transparent. And there are historical connections between Brazil and the Nazi movement, and the recent events have shown, unfortunately, just how deep those roots are. And consequently, our audience has demanded us to talk about current events and disease events, and to explain and analyze them from a historical perspective so they can better understand the times they're living in. So why is there people in Brazil denying the Holocaust? Why is there people in Brazil wearing a swastika in a shopping mall? And why is this happening? Why is Adolf Eichmann being mentioned in a parliamentary session during a COVID investigation? So these kind of things that we have to address with our audience, because they are curious and they want to know how they can understand this. And unfortunately, one thing we always say is that we wish our research wasn't so current or so relevant. At times, it really feels like we might as well be studying the present, because nothing has changed. But we are very glad to be able to do that and to do what we do and to respond to the public's demands for responsible historical analysis of recent events. And we're also very glad to be able to bring this content in Portuguese, which was something that didn't exist before us. People didn't have access to these materials and to this comprehension of the past because, as I mentioned several times, most of the things are in English and nothing is translated to Portuguese, nothing is brought here to Brazil. So we really have this job, which is very time consuming and but is also very rewarding. So I would like to finish with that more positive tone and invite you all to follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, and anywhere. It's nepatch.br. You can find us with this anywhere. And our website is nepatch.com. So everything is also on our website. And you can also find our email address there. And thank you so much for listening. And I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to present this because I am sure I would have amazing feedback from everyone, so many specialists in these fields of digital history. But I'm glad I can do it somehow and talk somehow about a work which I am, of course, very proud. And thank you again. And I hope I can meet you all in the future. And that's it. Thank you.